Welcome back to the Rundown, and let's take a look at the day's financial markets, starting with stocks. And trading does resume on Wall Street after the Martin Luther King holiday. And you can see that the Dow and all the other markets are heading way down in reaction to that slowing growth news out of China and concerns that it won't be able to make a trade deal with the U.S. Moving to commodities, and we can see that Brent crude is also dropping down. That's basically for the same reason. Finally, if we're looking at currencies, we can see that all that red is continuing across the board, across the globe.
All right, well, if we're talking economy, it is day one of Davos. That's shorthand for the annual gathering of political and business leaders on the snowy, beautiful slopes of Switzerland for the World Economic Forum. Some big names like President Donald Trump, British Prime Minister Theresa May are too consumed with some domestic woes to attend, but plenty of other top international figures are there. It's often criticized as an elitist event, but Davos does reflect and impact the global economic agenda. This year, that's perhaps the most unsettled since the financial crisis a decade ago. Joining us from there in Davos is Andrew Funk, founder and president of the Homeless Entrepreneur Association. First, let's start with our economy correspondent, Asher Westrop-Evans. Asher, a few things on the table there, some really big issues. What was in day one?
Well, certainly dominating the day from the economic perspective was these ongoing trade disputes between the US and China. And coming out of this 2018 numbers from China saying this growth, 6.6% in 2018, the slowest growth out of China since 1990, 28 years. But the Chinese were eager to downplay this, saying this is just a blip on the radar. And contrary to how Kalev mentioned that markets are moving today with a sudden drop, those at Davos seem to be buying into the agenda, saying, yes, this is a blip. Well, once we resolve these trade issues and the US and China do that with the air, that this is something that will inevitably happen, there is more of a calm stemming through Davos at the moment around this, although it is still very much in everyone's focus and people are hoping for a speedy conclusion to these trade affairs.
And Andrew, of course, one of the criticisms of Davos is that the people there, the leaders, are not really dealing with the problems that hit home for, let's say, the more average person or the majority of the world's population. So let's talk about what you're doing there, because in a way, what you're doing is sort of a criticism of Davos.
Well, we're sleeping out here for the second time. We did it last year, we're doing it again this year. And we're trying to bring inclusion into Davos because a lot of people are speaking about poverty, they're speaking about climate change, but they're not really bringing it to Davos, which is why we're sleeping out. It's quite cold. It got down to 15 below last night. And what we're trying to do is get them into meetings and thinking about how they can actually bring the people that they're talking about into the conversations in Davos.
Asher, if we're looking at some of the other issues on the table here that tie into a little bit, I think, to what Andrew was talking about, there's this globalism versus populism debate, the leaders who represent the sort of old establishment and some of the new ones, including Brazil's new president who took the stage today.
Exactly right, Noreen. Jair Bolsonaro, a huge focus this year, particularly with Trump and other senior American figures being absent, sort of came out today with a pledge, keeping with his populist agenda, to simplify the Brazilian government and open it up to other markets. And let's take a listen to exactly what he had to say.
Queremos governar pelo exemplo.
We want to govern by example, and we want to reestablish the trust the world has always had in us. We will lower the tax burden, simplify rules making life easier for those who want to produce, be entrepreneurs, invest and create jobs. We will work to foster macroeconomic stability while respecting contracts, privatizing assets and balancing government accounts.
Andrew, there are, of course, different types of populism, economic populism, sweeping through the world today from the right, kind of represented by Bolsonaro, also from the left, all of it a protest against the established economic order. You're there in Davos. Do you notice any change in maybe attitude, awareness of what is happening below those lofty mountains? Any impact there?
Well, the thing is, the conversations that take place, and mostly people are discussing things on panels. And so the conversations are almost the same as last year. There's really no difference. So I don't know. I can't see any difference in how populism that's affecting the globe on a large level is affecting people in Davos. Because people are here to do business and to party and have fun. So that's what they're doing. They're networking, and I think they're keeping their differences aside.
Asher, does that signal maybe a sort of reluctance to acknowledge a reality that's sweeping parts of the world there in Davos?
I mean, certainly so. And it was interesting to note, Oxfam just yesterday came out with a report stating that now, in terms of wealth inequality, the top 26 richest people in the world have the same amount of wealth as the bottom 3.8 billion people combined. That's 50% of the world's population. Reports like that coming out to try and bring some of these leaders back out of, as you said, their lofty mountain peaks and maybe taking a look at the larger economic scale and the larger economic scope as to what's going on there. Though many would say that Davos is a forum that can allow people to do this, that allows some of the world's economic leaders to come together and talk about issues in a way where they're actually communicating beyond just the business interests, but perhaps looking at global international interests such as refugees, a common topic that comes up. Wealth inequality is often mentioned, and these topics do get discussed, though whether meaningful progress happens or not remains to be seen.
Key word there, key part of your sentence, whether meaningful progress happens or not. What about climate change? That's another one of those major issues that we see at forums like this and that have gotten a degree of pushback from the United States leading it recently.
That's certainly right, and often going against the sort of more populist or more nationalist agenda. But on day one of Davos, there was a big focus on climate change, particularly coming in a very interesting interview held between Prince William and Sir David Attenborough, the great naturalist. We can take a little listen to what Attenborough had to say.
It's difficult to overstate it. We are now so numerous, so powerful, so all-pervasive. The mechanisms that we have for destruction are so wholesale and so frightening that we can actually just exterminate whole ecosystems without even noticing it. We have now to be really aware of the dangers of what we're doing. And we already know that, of course, the plastic problem in the seas is wreaking appalling damage upon marine life, the extent of which we don't yet fully know.
This conversation obviously having a very noted impact on the first day, sort of people using this as a focusing point to say, hey, here's something we need to look at. But it wasn't just Attenborough as well. Other celebrities came out to make similar statements. Matt Damon, for example, was there talking about global water crises and how this is going to be an impact going forward into the 21st century. So all these things obviously very salient still on this conference here at Davos.
Andrew, you have a background in what you might call social venture capitalism, where people, when they're investing, take into account these issues like climate change, like growth for the world's poorer populations. Is this a trend you've seen really growing over the period of time? Are you confident in 20 years that these people will be among those leaders there in Davos making these decisions?
As long as there's return on investment, I'm going to say the answer is yes, because I've spoken with many people at many different levels, and it always goes back to return on investment. So we have to think about how to turn donations into deposits and how to create wealth for those that are the main stakeholders. This is what I hear in all the conferences, the meetings, and in the coffee shops and in the street as well. They're focusing more on social issues, but they're trying to figure out how to have the right data regarding climate change as well. They're talking about there's enough data, but there's not enough clean data. And then the same thing goes with the issue of poverty, because they speak about the famous bottom billion.
Right.
But when you ask about that number, they don't have clean data on it. So I think they're going to focus on it. I think that social issues will be there.
All right, Andrew, we're going to have to wrap there. Andrew Funk in Davos, or Asher Westrup Evans, great to have you here. We will be right back on The Rundown. Don't go anywhere.